The movie opens with grainy footage of a ritual being performed. A girl is placed in the middle while a bloated man walks into a drawn-out ring with her. The girl is hanged by the neck before a second girl is revived. The camera focuses on the second girl's face, who has a wine-colored birthmark under her eye. The movie then cuts to Piper, a visually impaired teenager who is waiting for her stepbrother on the side of the road. She overhears a group of teenagers talking and, in the hope of making friends, approaches them. But they respond with coldness and distance. Just then, Andy arrives and gently steers her away. Later at home, Andy is outside fixing the side view mirror of his car when Piper suddenly calls out to him, saying that their dad, Phil, isn't responding from inside the bathroom. He forces the bathroom door open with a knife and finds his father collapsed on the floor, clearly dead. Piper arrives moments later and feels her stepfather's body on the floor. Overcome with emotion, she breaks down. The next day, a social worker named Wendy informs Piper that since she's underage, she'll be moving in with a kind foster mother named Laura. Then she tells Andy he'll be placed in a separate care unit. Andy protests, insisting he needs to stay with Piper because he has always taken care of her. He adds that he plans to file for Piper's custody as soon as he turns 18, which is just 3 months away. Wendy sympathizes and decides to place them together, but asks him to stay out of trouble for the remaining 3 months until he's eligible for custody. The next day, they head toward their new house. Piper holds her father's pillow as a keepsake. Hours later, they arrive at Laura's house. When they reach the doorstep, Laura calls out cheerfully, urging them to come inside. Laura greets Piper with exaggerated enthusiasm and suggests they take a group photo. However, when posing, she conveniently positions her head to block Andy's face from view. She then introduces her dog, but it turns out to be a taxidermied version of the dog. Andy notices a rug with a tactile strip for the visually impaired and asks if it's for Piper. Laura reveals that it's for her blind daughter, Kathy. Curious, Andy asks if she's in the house, but Laura reveals that she has passed. Andy apologizes while Piper asks how she died. Laura weakly tells her she drowned in the pool. She is then interrupted by a phone call from Wendy. Piper and Andy take the chance to explore the backyard. In doing so, they accidentally let the cat out. Laura quickly shouts at them not to let it out. While Andy tries to call the cat back, he notices a young boy tightly holding it inside the empty pool. That afternoon, Andy went outside to grab their things from the car. And that's when he notices a strange white circle covering the house, but he ignores it. He heads back inside and follows Laura as she leads Piper to her room, mentioning that it used to belong to her deceased daughter. Andy enters his small, cramped room, noticing that the door doesn't even close fully. Later, Andy is texting a friend when Laura quietly enters his room. She asks who Andy is texting, and he replies, "It's just a friend." Laura wants to know more about the text, but Andy doesn't open up. Then they hear Piper's voice through the wall. Andy uses it as an excuse to walk over and talk to her instead, leaving her phone behind. Laura seizes the moment and reads his message. Andy notices her, but it's too late. Frustrated, Andy starts lifting weights to clear his mind. Meanwhile, Piper is settling into her new room, while Laura watches from outside. Night falls. Laura checks the weather app on her phone, then inserts a VHS tape into the player and begins watching a strange occult ritual on her TV. At midnight, after turning and tossing for some time, Andy gets up and looks out the window. He sees Laura and Oliver heading into the garden shed. The next day, Laura paints a small white horizontal line across the pool, then looks up at the sky in silence. Sometime later, Laura yells for Andy to wake up. He jolts awake, noticing drool on his face, and that he's also wet the bed. Embarrassed, he gathers the sheets in his clothes and puts them in the washing machine. He heads to the bathroom for a shower, but his mind flashes back to finding his father dead on the bathroom floor. Upstairs, Laura locks Oliver inside his room. Then she takes both Piper and Andy to Phil's funeral. Laura takes Andy inside and encourages him to kiss his father goodbye, and he reluctantly kisses him on the forehead. Laura then leans in and kisses Phil on the lip. After the service, Laura cuts a lock of Phil's hair. Meanwhile, Oliver breaks his room's window and sneaks out. He makes his way to the shed, but since it is locked, he ends up staring at the nearby chicken coop. That night, the trio plays games, drinks, and dances. Laura even allows Piper a drink or two and eventually passes out. After midnight, Laura urinates into a cup and pours it onto Andy's pants while he sleeps to make him think that he wet the bed. It turns out she's been secretly drugging Andy by lacing his protein powder with drugs. She unlocks his phone and deletes all the photos of Oliver and the surrounding area he has taken. Suddenly, Laura hears a cat screaming. She goes outside, takes Oliver to the bathroom, and gives him a bath, but he appears to have his eyes turn bright red. The next morning, Andy wakes up soaked in urine. Frustrated and confused, he gets up to clean himself, but runs into Laura in the hallway. She insists on taking his clothes. Laura smells Andy's clothes and asks, "Did you pee?" And Andy says he doesn't know what happened. Laura then asks him to take a shower. Andy washes himself using the garden tap outside, as taking a shower still triggers his trauma. Just then, he sees Oliver lift his hand near the window. Thinking it's a wave, Andy waves back. Then he heads to Oliver's room, but finds it locked. So he grabs a knife and pries it open. In the living room, Andy bombards Oliver with questions, but Oliver just stares into space. Andy grabs a notepad and pen, hands them to him, and says he'll only give him food if he writes something. Oliver takes the notepad and writes. Andy hands him a slice of cantaloupe still stuck to the knife. But instead of just eating the fruit, Oliver grabs the entire knife. Andy turns back for a moment, then hears a metallic scraping sound. When he looks back, he sees Oliver biting down on the knife, causing damage to his mouth and teeth. Panicked, Andy yanks the knife away and drags Oliver outside to get help. But as soon as Oliver crosses the strange white circle painted on the ground, he screams and vomits. His body begins convulsing violently. Just then, Laura and Piper arrive home. Laura loses it and yells at Andy to take Piper inside. He then spots the paper Oliver had written on earlier, which says, "Bird." Meanwhile, Laura takes Oliver into her room and starts playing the occult video. Almost immediately, he snaps out of whatever trance he was in. He screams at the top of his voice, terrified, so Laura quickly covers his mouth with her hand. Laura watches the ritual, and following its instructions, she begins drawing circles on his head, trying to calm him down. Soon after, Piper and Andy knock on Laura's door. Still angry at Andy, only lets Piper in. She reaches into her bag and brings out Phil's hair, which she feeds to Oliver. Later, Andy musters the courage to shower again, but as he enters the bathroom, the door creaks open behind him. Standing there is the pale figure of his dead father. He mutters, "She'll die in the rain." Andy panics and tries to run, but slips and slams his head against the floor. Andy wakes up in a hospital room and sees rain is pouring. He pleads with the doctors to let him go, insisting his sister is in danger, but they sedate him instead. Back at Laura's house, she happily watches the pool as it fills with rainwater. The next day, Laura visits Andy, who immediately asks where Piper is. She replies that Piper is home with Oliver. She reveals to him that he needs to stay in the hospital another day. Andy, still unsettled, warns Laura not to let Piper out in the rain, saying she could die in it. Laura goes back home and plays outside in the rain with Piper while she reminisces about Kathy's and the time she played in the pool. Later on, Laura takes Piper into the garden shed and gives her a purple cardigan, saying it was Kathy's favorite. Laura then tells Piper there's one more thing she needs to show her. Gently, she guides Piper toward the freezer and places her hand on Kathy's cold, lifeless body. The next day, while driving Andy home from the hospital, Laura vents to Wendy over the phone, clearly unhappy about his early discharge. Once home, Andy checks on Piper. In an effort to turn Piper against Andy, Laura sprays herself with Andy's body spray and goes into Piper's room to punch her hard in the face, leaving her with a black eye. When Andy wakes up and comes downstairs, he notices Piper's black eye and demands to know who hurt her. Laura immediately blames him. She makes Piper think that Andy did it and that he was hiding Phil's abuse of him from her out of envy. Then Andy notices something strange about Oliver's appearance and tries to take a photo to show the social worker. They get into a scuffle and in frustration, Andy punches the wall, where Laura makes Piper think that Andy hit her. Andy goes alone to meet Wendy. While waiting, he sees a missing child poster for a boy named Connor Bird, and he realizes it's Oliver. Meanwhile, despite Piper's objections, Laura drops her off at gold ball practice. Back to Andy, he points out that Laura has kidnapped a child. Wendy insists that Laura would never hurt a child, and she has worked in foster care for 20 years and is a close friend of hers. Meanwhile, Laura returns home to find that Oliver has ransacked the entire house. When Laura tries to stop him, he bites a huge chunk of flesh off her arm. She runs and locks herself inside a room. Oliver then proceeds to start chewing on the thick wooden table, wrecking his mouth further with splinters, before he bites off a large strip of flesh from his own arm and begins eating it. Slowly and methodically, Laura bandages her hand. Then, to soothe Oliver, she draws a symbol on the window and eventually lets him eat Kathy's body. Back with Andy, he convinces Wendy to visit Laura's home. On the way, Andy leaves Piper a heartfelt voice message. He insists it was Laura who punched her and that she also kidnapped Oliver. Andy hands the phone to Wendy without ending the call, allowing Laura to hear Wendy's voice. Realizing Wendy is coming, Laura hurriedly starts cleaning the house and pours Andy's protein powder down the sink. Wendy and Andy arrive at Laura's house. Wendy instructs him to stay in the car. At the door, Wendy tells Laura that Andy has raised serious concerns about child abuse, and she's required to inspect the home. Laura welcomes her in and shows her Piper and Andy's rooms. Meanwhile, Andy slips out of the car, climbs over the fence, and approaches the locked garden shed. He grabs a bird bath, smashes the lock, and peers inside, only to find Oliver hunched over a corpse eating. Back inside, Wendy shows Laura a photo of Connor Bird, the missing child, and asks if she's seen him. Just then, Wendy notices Laura bleeding and hears Andy screaming for her from outside. Laura calmly says to Wendy, "I can bring Kathy back." Terrified, Wendy rushes out and sees the grotesque scene Andy uncovered. Just as the two try to escape, Laura runs over both of them. Wendy is killed instantly. Andy, still alive but badly injured, so Laura dips his head into a puddle, killing him. Later, Laura picks up Piper from practice. Back home, Piper asks Laura to call her phone since she can't find it. Laura replies that she will. Moments later, Piper hears Andy's voice and follows the sound upstairs. She touches someone, and just then, Laura appears, asking what Piper is doing there. Piper says she heard Andy's voice, but Laura insists it was just Oliver. Realizing Laura had lied about Oliver's hair, Piper runs and locks herself in a room. Inside, she stumbles upon a body and identifies it as her brother by feeling his braces. Laura unlocks the door with a spare key and chillingly explains her plan to resurrect Kathy to her. Piper manages to escape but hits her head in the process and loses consciousness. Laura drags her to the pool where a grotesquely bloated Oliver waits. Laura begins to drown Piper, who fights and struggles. Just as she's slipping away, Piper screams a single word that stops Laura in her tracks. "Mom." Laura freezes. Her mind flashes back to Kathy, gasping, drowning, helpless. She lets Piper go, but Oliver isn't ready to let her go. He lunges at her, but she kicks him hard in the stomach, causing him to vomit violently. Taking the opportunity, Piper runs toward the road and is found by a couple who take her to safety. Meanwhile, Oliver sees the missing child poster with his real name, Connor, on it. He deliberately steps beyond the chalk line Laura had drawn to contain him. Meanwhile, Laura gently carries Kathy's decayed body to the pool, but not before reopening the gash on her own arm. Police then arrive at Laura's house, where they find Oliver. Eventually, the police go to the pool and find a dead Laura cradling Kathy's body.